You're tuned into Inside Lowell. Inside Lowell podcast brought to you in part by Washington Savings Bank, serving the greater Lowell community for over 130 years. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. Reverie 73, Lowell's #1 cannabis shop. Elevate your cannabis experience at Reverie 73. Hafner's, heating and cooling homes and businesses for nearly a century. Hafner's, it kicks. And by Boston North Company, restaurant and retail solutions for your business. That's Boston North. And now, time for another Inside Lowell podcast. Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Inside Lowell, another Inside Lowell podcast coming to you from the Inside Lowell studios here in beautiful, historic downtown Lowell. I am your host, Teddy Panos. Excited this morning. We're recording this on Monday morning, August 7th, I believe is the date here. And we are pleased to be joined in person this morning in our studios by our Congresswoman, 3rd District Congresswoman Lori Trahan. Good morning, Congresswoman. Welcome.
Good morning, Teddy. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It's good to have you here. You're actually in town for a big announcement just about an hour from when we record this. You're here to announce the $21.4 million in funding as part of the transportation bill that was passed a couple of years ago, and it's going to 4 specific Lowell bridges. One that I drive over, walk over, look at every single day over there by our Market and Dutton Street. And you're also
across the street from one of the best Greek restaurants in the state.
Thank you very much for getting the plug in for Athenian Quarter. You're joined by a couple of DC, I don't want to call them heavyweights, but some bigwigs coming in town. The 2 senators from Massachusetts are joining us as well. Give us a little bit about what today is about and how it came to be, please.
Great. Yeah, no, so today is a great day for Lowell. Certainly, this is important that, we focus on not just making our streets and our bridges safer so that, parents and workers can get to where they need to go, get their kids off to school and travel safely. But, a lot of times when we're talking about bridges like the Market Street Bridge, I mean, they have been, victim of the huge divestment that the federal government has over decades of not, putting money into our infrastructure. So the bipartisan infrastructure law really was a huge step forward. I mean, we know that there's $9.5 billion coming to the state just through the formula funding, which we talk a lot about, the $140 million that will come to replace the Rourke Bridge, finally. But then what often gets lost in the shuffle is all the competitive grants that ride along in that bill. And, my job is to make sure we increase that $9.5 billion to, $10 billion or $15 billion or $20 billion to the state of Massachusetts. And Lowell took a huge step by applying for this RAISE grant. It's a super competitive grant for these 4 bridges. And they beat out every single community in the state of Massachusetts. They got the highest amount in this cycle of grants and in the top 50 of the entire country. So I really have to hand it to City Manager Golden and the council and everybody in the administration who put together such a compelling application, because we were able to really impress upon the administration the importance of Lowell's application.
So that's interesting information there, because a lot of folks, they see these announcements, and your office is making them constantly, money coming back to the district, and we celebrate it, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so what, how does the competition work to get the money today as opposed to hoping to get it next year or the following fiscal year? You praise the local administration.
I do. This is tough. There's such enormous potential investment from the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've taken on the role of becoming a conduit, with our 35 communities, working hand in glove to make sure that they know when an announcement is posted for an application, helping them, put together together. Maybe it's a coalition to make their application stronger. Sometimes, I've got very small towns that don't have a grant writer. And so helping them partner with folks so that they can, take advantage of these competitive opportunities. But it's enormously competitive, and it's also voluminous, and just, it can be daunting. So Lowell has done a great job sort of, pivoting, using their DPD department and their administration to say, what are all the opportunities out there, and putting them in huge buckets, right? There's obviously the roads and bridges, but there's water infrastructure, there's energy, the list goes on and on through a number of agencies. And so, our team, works with our communities to make sure they know about it, and then they put together a great application, and then, we're supportive of those applications.
And how much lobbying do you have to do? Because I would imagine there are 8 of your colleagues representing the other Massachusetts districts who would like their share of funding.
Yes, you can be competitive with us too.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so what happens once the city submits a grant, and I'm sure there's a process, how does the final stage play out, and what role does your office play in that?
Yes, so, very often we'll be in competition with other gateway cities, and that's typical, when we have these funding rounds. I'm lucky. I'm on the Regional Leadership Council, so I represent all of New England with the I sit with the administration on a weekly basis to get the money that we've appropriated out the door, right? We want to make sure that when people hear about the Inflation Reduction Act or infrastructure or chips in science, that the best way for them to understand how transformative is if they feel it, and if the money is invested into their community. So I work a lot with the White House on just streamlining that process and getting the money out the door in an accelerated way. So every opportunity, Teddy, that I'm at the White House, I'm plugging for Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill, as well as wearing my New England hat. And frankly, the state administration, the Healy administration, has really taken a collaborative effort. They've matched a lot of funds that have gone into some of these applications, which has made them more compelling, and just kind of put them to the top of the list with the administration.
So you mentioned the Rourke Bridge. So there's money already allocated in that big federal transportation bill for the Rourke Bridge? 40 million.
140 million.
140
million. So that is that's a formula. There's a number of projects besides the Rourke Bridge. There's some VFW funding. I want to say $7 million. There's Rogers Street to make coming off the highway a little bit easier, and that's all formulaic. So it's just automatic. And then there's other buckets that are competitive. All these new grants that they've stood up, and those are the ones where the city of Lowell put together an application to get this RAISE grant, and that's going to happen on an annual basis over the next 4 years, because the funding horizon is a 5-year horizon for the infrastructure funding.
So Manager Golden and others in your communities are going to be reaching out every year to try to get as many of these as possible.
Yeah.
All right. That is definitely good news indeed. I've been told on the Rourke Bridge, I'm hearing some rumblings that they're going to start to go out to bid in 2025, and some other things are going to be happening. So this is a definite.
Yes.
You can sit here today and tell us we're definitely going to start to work on this bridge in the next year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the Rourke Bridge has always been on, it's the STIP. It's the sort of the prioritization from the state of funding. Would I have liked the Rourke Bridge to be number one so that, this project could have started tomorrow? Of course. But, we're at the mercy of the state's sort of prioritization of projects. And so, it was just 2 years ago that then Governor Charlie Baker came to Lowell because he knew how important, replacing this bridge was, to announce the entire bipartisan infrastructure law and what it was going to mean to communities like Lowell. And so, we're excited. If anything, what we want to do is just accelerate it in any way we can.
All right, good. Speaking of bipartisan, you've been working on a couple of bipartisan tech proposals designed to protect online information and simplify terms of agreement. How are you going to accomplish that? Every time you sign up for something on the web or download a new app, you get these long terms of service that my eyes can't even see, let alone read and comprehend it. How do you propose that this process is going to be made easier and that people are more aware of what's actually happening with their information when they sign up for something online?
Yeah, and part of it is that there is bipartisan consensus around two bills. One is the TLDR, which basically takes that long and consumable terms of service that we've even stopped reading because it's just legal jargon, not understandable, and we just check the box so that we can get to whatever website or app we're trying to, use. And turn that into a nutrition label style disclosure that is understandable, right? It's like, it's fair, it's transparent, and it's easy to read. Now, that's not going to solve all the problems, right? Because you're still going to be forced to either check the box or not use the service, but at least it will show this is the types of data that we collect. This is what we use it for. This is where we sell it, to brokers or things like that. And then the next step, of course, and obviously we take transparency as always the first step, so that when people see, they're like, oh my gosh, I want to opt out of this piece or that piece. TLDR it's such common sense. It's just putting it in a consumable format so that people can understand what data is being collected on them. And then certainly the next step is, how do I opt out?
Okay. Yeah, the nutrition label idea is a pretty good idea. Just make sure they print it nice and big so I can see it. Okay. There was, related to that, there was something scary I saw this morning that one of the, I believe it's Facebook, but don't quote me on it, but one of these big tech companies is part of their terms of service. Now they're making you accept something that says AI your voice and your image and stuff like that, and things you say can be used for AI purposes. And I'm not important enough for it to matter, but you are. I've been told the technology exists right now where they could create a video of you saying something that you have absolutely never said, never thought of, and would 120% be against. That's a scary frontier to get out there. And how quickly do we have to start acting on these issues before the technology becomes really widespread? Because folks are already starting to dabble in the AI.
Absolutely. And it's critically important. I think that AI, there's enormous promise in terms of, what it can do and how quickly it can do it. And you think about the application, whether it's in healthcare and probing number of records, or there's like a million applications. However, Congress needs to take a very proactive role. One that we haven't taken on a whole bunch of other issues. And I would just juxtapose that with privacy legislation, right? We are in a reactionary stance right now, and I don't want us to be in that stance with AI. And it's really important that as we're talking about AI, that we're talking about the privacy standards that we have today, which are nil, right? You do not have any control over your data, over your children's data. And really, these big tech companies are the ones who stand to benefit, just as they have from collecting these reams of data and use it to target you more, to keep your kids online more, to allow misinformation or disinformation to really flourish. AI could just accelerate and exacerbate that. And so I'm happy because Congress has taken a bunch of steps, mostly educational. We've had a number of hearings and briefings, bipartisan, bringing experts in. So I think we have to move quickly, but we need to make sure everyone sort of understands, and we're all like playing, with the same information, so that we really engage in thoughtful policy and that we don't leave privacy out of the package.
This was a big topic of discussion last time you sat in that chair, and we talked about how in Europe and other parts of the world, these things are already in place. And it's shocking to me that because obviously the big tech companies will try to make as much money as they can, right? That's why you're in business. But it's not like they're not going to go along if forced to. They've done it in other countries. So why here in America is it taking so long to get to a consensus on this? I would imagine it is one of the few bipartisan things that you can get done in DC, right?
It is. In fact, we passed a comprehensive privacy bill through our committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, near unanimously last Congress. And it got stopped before going onto the House floor. I am hopeful, and the Senate hasn't sort of kept pace with the House in terms of coming up with a bipartisan agreement. But I am optimistic that that is one of the things that we will be able to do, where Republicans and Democrats will really hash out. We might come at this problem with different gripes and different concerns, but it's amazing that we've agreed on some of the prescriptions. And I'm going to fight for privacy legislation. Look, we did talk about what the EU has done. They even have a framework for AI regulation. And so we've got good models and, frankly, good test kitchens, right, to see. We do have U.S. companies that are already complying with those rules. They do not amend their platforms or adjust their platforms for our children, which we've been really forcing or some pressure on them to do. But at the end of the day, we have to just put this in statute, and we have to pass a privacy bill.
All right. Let's look at an area where you are battling with your opponents across the aisle in D.C., and that is school meals cuts. What are they trying to cut? What is your understanding of what exactly they're trying to accomplish here?
So, we had a bipartisan agreement for the debt ceiling, which set, limits on what the appropriation bills, and there's 12 of them in the House and in the Senate. Unfortunately, what the Republicans in the House did is they actually made more strident cuts than even what was agreed upon, when we did the debt ceiling back in June. And those cuts they're devastating. We've made a lot of progress during COVID and since in terms of fighting, child hunger. School meals and school lunch programs are a major tool in that fight. But so isn't WIC and SNAP. I took to the floor, right before we recessed because it's just pretty cruel. Some of the cuts, they go right to a line item of cutting the fruit and vegetable benefit in WIC. For children, for expectant mothers, for postpartum mothers. And so it's just, these are unnecessary and cruel cuts, and frankly, way below the deal that we made back in June. And so what I'm hopeful is the Senate won't follow suit, and that when we negotiate final package on appropriations, which needs to be done before September 30th, that, the Senate will bring those numbers back up.
Okay. Just to be clear on this, because if we're talking about school meals, here in Lowell, a few years back, everybody's school lunch was free in Lowell. This isn't what we're talking about, though, that they're cutting. They're cutting some kind of means-based testing for who qualifies for this. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, well, they're cutting the top line, all right? So money that comes, and then they're also, putting new means test on existing programs. And what I would argue is that we know what works. I mean, we have decades of, research around how you fund school lunch, how you fund WIC, how you fund SNAP. These are our safety social nets. If not for these programs in our school, and look, I grew up in a working class family. We lived paycheck to paycheck. I mean, the reality is in Congress, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people who actually understand the anxiety of, having that benefit to get them through a tough time. Maybe, it's in between jobs, unemployment. Maybe it's a woman who's working, 3 jobs and, she needs that benefit so that when she uses her card at the grocery store, she knows it's going to work. But that has helped us, especially in times of crisis, but also in, steady state times to help mitigate the hunger problem, especially in our school age children. And that's just not a place where this budget needs to make cuts.
So to be clear, I think in America, we can probably ensure that every kid going to school gets some lunch that they don't have to pay for if they choose that option. But let me play devil's advocate here for a minute, because in terms of the means testing here in Lowell, no matter how wealthy you are or poor you are, you're getting free school lunch. There are some who say, well, is it fair for people living in poverty, because everybody who pays taxes is contributing to this, to be picking up the school meals for wealthy, affluent students? There are some wealthier and more affluent students in Lowell. How would you respond to that? If we're not going to make sure that everybody's getting it, should the means testing at least ensure that the folks who don't necessarily need this money it isn't going to be going to them, and we're going to ensure that it is going to those who truly need it? Look, how do we ensure that?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different programs that are targeted to, the kids who are most disadvantaged. When I think of like our food bank funding, our Meals on Wheels for seniors, those are programs that they're well understood, and there is like a median income or whatever that helps sort of in the distribution of those funds. Look, I think when we're talking about school lunch, and especially like in a gateway city like Lowell, making it easier for kids to get not just meals, nutritious meals in school, in a place where they are learning, is something I think we can all get behind, especially in a state like Massachusetts. We know that we have better outcomes in terms of academic success, focus, all of that, health, when we have, a healthy and nutritious lunch or breakfast that kids have access to. Massachusetts has been a leader on this. I think the federal government should follow suit, especially, look, we're at a point we could talk for days about how different this Congress is compared to past Congresses that I've served in, and it's only been 2 others. But we're literally talking about some members who are putting pen to paper on legislation to just cut public education in our country. I mean, this is a time where we have to really hold the line, continue making progress, continue making sure college is affordable, our public education system can help all children, sort of flourish and succeed in their communities. School lunch is an easy way to do that.
Okay. I'm going to have to let you go in a couple of minutes because you do have an important event to get to. I just wanted to quickly touch on 2 things. Number one, we reported on Inside Lowell over the weekend that the Healy administration was looking at a former Catholic school in Lowell as an emergency shelter for migrant families. They've since said they're no longer considering that site, but my information is they are looking at other sites in Lowell and everywhere else. Yeah. I've also been told by the governor's office that there are currently 5,500 families living in these types of shelters, and I'm told by others that number is growing by thousands per month. Clearly, the crisis at the border, we can't just say, that's just Texas now or Arizona, New Mexico, whatever. This is now clearly affecting Massachusetts, and it's affecting Lowell, probably Lawrence, Haverhill, and other communities that you represent.
Absolutely. Marlboro.
Why can't we get together and the pathway is pretty clear. It's been there since he was in office in 2017 and 2018, Donald Trump, who we'll get to. But the border needs to be fixed. We have to figure out how we're going to deal with everybody that's already here, and then also fix the immigration policy going forward. Yeah. Why can't it get done?
Politics, right? This is a topic as we get closer to a campaign election year. It's a favorite of. I don't want to lay the blame totally on my Republican colleagues, but I will say that there are many Republicans and Democrats who know that we have to take up comprehensive immigration reform. We have to update our laws that have been in sort of disrepair, outdated for decades. We have to secure our border. We have to remain a country of laws, and we can't keep pitting states against each other. Everyone is getting hurt by the dysfunction. However, as we approach next year, presidential campaign year, every House member is on the ballot. They believe that securing the border or talking about an open border is a winning message for them. And I think at some point, folks have to just hold folks accountable. We have to say, like, look, are you down there to actually sit in a room with maybe people who, don't think exactly like you to kind of resolve this and get this done? Or are you just going to talk about this every 2-year cycle? I am exhaustive in terms of talking, to Republican colleagues about what can be done. We know that there are ways to secure our border. The president has actually taken some pretty forceful steps in terms of where the application is originated in the country that people are. That's why we've seen, a drop in migrants who have presented at the border in the last, 4 months. But we have so much to do. I mean, what the Healy administration is going through is it's really tough. I mean, we have a housing crisis in our state, never mind emergency housing to put migrants in. We don't have the authority right now to expedite workforce authorization, right? That is something she's really pressing the Biden administration, and the federal delegation is supportive, especially people who want to come and just get to work. We have a workforce shortage, and not just Massachusetts, but across the country. And then just getting to the bipartisan and the very difficult work of updating our immigration laws is something that should be happening in the background, always, because it's going to take a long time for us to debate and kind of dig into the details on all the different aspects, visa programs, entry, asylum, migrants, what we do with the border, and that is a colossal package. But we have to, look, that's why we go there. We go there to make those tough decisions and to have those debates and pass laws. That's desperately needed.
Should the Biden administration do more to stem the flow across the border for now, while states are being overwhelmed by having to deal with these folks?
Yeah, so, they have. They took it in when Title 42 ended, it was back in May. They put some pretty stringent policies in place around stemming migrants making that trek all the way up to the border, and then consequences for if they did, when they would be able to do it again. We know that has stemmed the flow of migrants to the border, but we also know that there are states like Texas and Florida. In Texas in particular, I will juxtapose Governor DeSantis to Governor Healy any day, because he's literally pushing people back into the Rio Grande, some of them who have asylum claims, legal asylum claims, rather than, showing some compassion and letting that go through the legal process. There's no question we have to update our laws, but today and every day we are a nation of laws, and the ones that we have in place are the ones that we have to abide by. It's the state of Texas, sending migrants to Massachusetts, where we do need federal help. And I think the governor is, calling on the Biden administration. And I think I read something in Politico this morning about, emergency authorizations maybe being announced this week. And I think she needs the flexibility to do that.
Okay. And lastly, you continue to hammer away at efforts with Cambodia. You represent a large Cambodian constituency here in Lowell. The Hun Sen administration continuing to crack down on human rights, institutions, and political opposition.
Yeah, they just had elections. They were a sham. No political opposition on the ballot, no free press to report on elections. Of course, he won with an overwhelming, victory. There's no surprise there when you virtually have a dictator in place, and now making moves to pass the baton to his, son, during this term. So, look, the United States has levers in terms of financial sanctions and making sure that we are, the arbiters for democracy and free press and human rights, and we've taken that seriously across the globe, and it's a place where we in Cambodia is a place where it needs the United States attention.
Does the United States lose some legitimacy in those claims when we see some of the things happening here? We've seen interference with free press in elections that's been exposed now. Stories that were suppressed have now been proven to be true. Some will say we're seeing the exact same crackdown on political opposition in terms of the criminal cases against Donald Trump. You knew I was going to get you there at some point. Okay. Look, you folks impeached him in January of 2021 over this.
Yeah.
Did they really have to wait 3 years in the middle of an election season to file the criminal charges? It looks political. Should they have just waited till after the election?
So I guess I'll start with the comparison to Cambodia, which I think is wholly different. We have an independent judiciary in our country, which, Cambodia does not have. And this is actually these charges, which we always knew there was going to be, the possibility of criminal charges, whether it's in the classified documents case, in the January 6th insurrection overturning the election, and certainly, the others that have ensued. And so, look, the time, I mean, I think you have to think about it not so much since, the impeachment vote. I mean, I voted to impeach this president. I don't think he has a role to play in our presidential politics. I don't think he should be allowed to run for president in our country, given what he did. But when you consider when the special counsel was appointed, it hasn't been 3 years. And so putting together, a case, which he now has to try and prove, I don't think we should confuse that there is politics at play here in a campaign election year when he's moving as aggressively as he can, given when he was put into the role. And look, I know, I mean, I with every time I post or, communicate to my colleagues, everyone should just sort of, have some discipline around not interfering with the special counsel with an active criminal proceeding. That's how our government is set up. We have an independent judiciary, and we have separation of powers as written in our Constitution. And I think it's really important that people just not try to interfere with that process. I've seen our committee structures in this Congress really take an active role in bringing in and sort of trying the judiciary, and I think that's a mistake on either side.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join us here this morning. And again, big event coming up. I'm told it moved to inside City Hall now instead of outside by the bridge.
Yes, and our senators will be there. It's a big day for Lowell, and I'm excited to get there and go present a nice big check.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you in a couple of months.
All right, Teddy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Congresswoman Trahan for joining us here. And thank you to all of you for joining us as well here at Inside Lowell. As we like to say, if Lowell is your home, Inside Lowell is your place. Till next time, stay safe, everybody.